this research doesn't end for me. I have weird questions. I got into this, like the question that really intrigues me is where does the information come from? Because when we're in flow, we have access to really high quality information. And 90 to 95% of it, same thing with psychedelics, right? 90-95% of it I can explain to you through neurobiology. I can. Mechanism, heightened pattern recognition, heightened lateral thinking, complicated networks, blah, blah, blah. But there's 5 to 10% where I'm just like, I don't know where that information comes from. I'll give you a simple example of my own life. So there was a day I was surfing. I was in El Porto, which is a little south of LA, and kind of a ferocious wave sometimes. And I dropped into a wave, and it was, as I pulled in, it was bigger than I thought. I thought it was going to be like a 5-foot wave, and it was actually like an 8-foot wave, which is sizable there. And it sucked all the water off the sand, and it jacked and went vertical, and I was literally sort of falling, and I was gonna go face first in the sand, and the wave was gonna land on top of me, and I, kind of dropped into one of those emergency flow states that show up every now and again, right? And I kind of managed to surf my way out of it. I linked together like 7 different moves to surf my way out of it. Now I am an intermediate surfer at best. I'm a good skier. I'm a good mountain. There's things I'm good at. I'm not a good surfer. I'm average at best. And I linked together 7 moves that I had never done before. Not even one of them. And I did 7 in a row. Now, where did the information come from? Because you can say, I can explain the biology. I can say, well, in flow, all of the neurochemicals that show up, they're performance-enhancing chemicals, right? They increase muscle reaction time, they increase strength, they deaden pain, right? But I still had to move my body in very specific, exact patterns to do that. So maybe somehow, mirror neurons or whatever, I watched enough surf movies that I took it in that my brain, right? Maybe, but it's still an interesting, where did that come from, right? I'll give you another example.
Collective conscious.
Small Furry Prayer. The first book I was nominated for a Pulitzer for. Yeah. Funny story. So I never really had writer's block, and I turned the first draft of the book into my editor. This was, say, in April, and she called me up and said, "Stephen, so I got good news and bad news." And I said, "Well, all right, what's the good news?" She said, "The good news is the first 110 pages of this book are pretty great. Need some work, but they're pretty great." I said, "What's the bad news?" She said, "Everything after that sucks, and you should start over." And I was kind of devastated, right? But you get bad news like that as writers. That happens. Doesn't happen that often, but it happens. Never happened to me before with a book, but whatever. So I was like, okay, I can fix this. The book wasn't due till October, and suddenly I had writer's block. So all of April goes by in May, and I haven't written a word. In June, I managed to write 4 pages. I write a new introduction, and then I get stuck again, and nothing else happens. And July, and this was at a time I was really poor. This was it was 2007, and the bottom had dropped out of the publishing industry, it dropped out of the magazine industry, and literally my income, I made as much that year as I made the first year I was a journalist. It was a horrific year, and I was terrified, and so I really actually needed the money from the book. Right, it was really important to making my mortgage and things like that. There was lots of pressure, and I'm totally stuck. And August comes up, and I'm still not writing. And it's the end of August, and a friend of mine calls me up, and so I live in northern New Mexico, and he says, "Have you ever been downhill mountain biking? They're running the lifts at Parrito." Parrito is the ski area that's above Los Alamos National Laboratory. There's a ski area above it called Parrito. And it's actually one of the gnarliest, most dangerous downhill mountain biking places in the world because it was cut by all these crazy athletes. I didn't know any of that. And I didn't, I had a cross-country bike. I stopped. I was like, yeah, let's try it. I got to do something. I got to get the hell out of here. I stopped at a thrift store in Los Alamos and bought hockey pads and football pads because I didn't have any body armor. And I didn't even know where to get body armor, but I just knew you needed it for downhill mountain biking. So I bought whatever I could. Nobody ever looks stupider on a mountain bike. And if you've ever, downhill mountain biking, for me, so I couldn't ride a bike after one of my first major injuries, I split my patella when I was really young, and I couldn't ride a bike. So I didn't really ride a bike until I was about 40 years old, and I got to New Mexico, and I needed a summer sport, so I bought a cross-country bike. And I'd ridden it maybe 7 or 8 times by the time this phone call came in. So I'd really only been on a bike like 8 times since I was 15 years old or whatever. And the first experience, the first run is, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm absolutely going to die. The second run is, I can't believe a bicycle can go over these things. Like I can't believe. The third run was, oh my God, this is the most addictive thing I've ever done. And I was like popped into the deepest flow state ever. Amazing flow state. And I, maybe 4 or 5 more runs that day. And I went home and I was like, oh, I'm really in flow. Let's see if I can write, right? Let's see what I can do. And I sat down and it just like for the next 2 weeks, unless I was sleeping, I was in like this nonstop flow state. And that doesn't happen it happens with startups. Startups we're like leading up to launch. Sometimes you'll see people where the whole company is in flow, together, sort of leading up to launch, and you have those experiences every now and again. But it's really unusual to have like day after day after day of flow, and it's neurobiologically pretty difficult. Right. But I wrote this book in like 2 weeks, and I turned it in, and my editor came back to me, and the funny thing was, she had changes in the first 110 pages. Like the part she liked, there were in the second 200 pages, the 200 pages I'd written in Flow, I think she had 1 edit in 200 pages. I've never seen anything like that. As a journalist, as a writer, as an author, I'm now, a lot older. I've still never seen anything like that again. It was astounding. The book came out, it was a bestseller, and it was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, did very well. I have no idea who wrote it. Like, honest to God, I have no idea who wrote it. Like, I couldn't do it again. I don't know what that was. It's like a giant mystery to me. So where the hell did that information come from?